Hello, this is Utkarsh Ahuja. I'm here with Vishal Sikka, CTO of SAP, and you're watching TiEcon Live. Welcome everyone, this is Utkarsh Ahuja. I'm sitting here with Vishal Sikka, CTO of SAP. Welcome Vishal.
Thanks, nice to be here.
Glad to have you here. You just delivered a very impacting and inspirational speech. And now I am actually very privileged to have you here sitting with myself. And I have a few questions for you in regards to your speech, your vision, and the man behind Vishal.
Okay.
Vishal, you were the first, you became the first CTO of SAP.
Yeah.
And were you expecting to actually become the CTO of SAP, and what was the progression path that you went through for your role?
So prior to being the CTO, I was the head of architecture for SAP. I was the chief software architect for SAP. And we had a president of SAP's product group, that was Shai Agassi. And when Shai Agassi left SAP, we had the entire development organization for SAP got split into 4 or 5 different groups. And it became evident that there was a need to have a central technical leader, not the head of development, but to look at the architecture, the product strategy, the technology strategy across the board for the whole company. So a little more than a year ago, I became the first CTO ever at SAP.
That's great.
Prior to that, I would say that perhaps we had Hasso Plattner as our founder and primary technologist. He was there, so there wasn't a need to have a formal CTO office before that.
Right. So what plans does SAP have put in place to improve the user experience of its products?
We have a fairly significant investment in that. I mentioned our software, it serves a pretty broad spectrum of activities across a business. And so the user experience is something that always gets impacted by that, by the fact that the core business activities don't change much over time, even though the technologies do. And the user interface is in particular a very challenging area because there is constant innovation happening in UI technologies. So in fact, the leader of our user experience at SAP is in my organization, Dan Rosenberg. He is a very famous UI designer, perhaps the best UI designer on the planet. So we have well-defined ways of addressing user experience. We have a design services team in addition to user experience that looks at the way people interact, the way people conduct their business activity, and so forth. So we spend a lot of time thinking about this. From a technical perspective, user experience is also a very important one for us because most of our software gets interacted with in not only one medium. We have the browser, the rich clients, but also Microsoft Office, Lotus Notes, mobile devices, and increasingly there are SAP-powered stores sitting in Second Life and behind widgets and things like that. So it is a diverse user experience strategy which serves multiple UI technologies, but ultimately serves the user in their context in the best possible way. That is, in a nutshell, that's where we are going.
Yeah, I think UI is definitely one of the big buzz these days, and everyone is moving towards getting an understanding of the just the experiences from user perspective.
Absolutely.
In your speech that you just delivered, from a macro level, you talked about building large-scale enterprise products and implementing flexible languages. How would that philosophy pertain to budding startups?
I think that startups, first of all, have to look at what kinds of languages do they use to build the software that they need to build. It could be that for the class of applications or class of products that they need to build, perhaps some languages are better than others. Languages in the end are our way of expressing meaning, as I mentioned in my talk. They're our way of expressing what our software is intended to do. And different languages have different user bases, different user communities around them, and so forth. And they also have functional aspects to them. And so you have to make a choice about what kind of software do you want to build, what are the characteristics of that, and therefore what is the best language for that. It could be that for even today, for complex, intense software systems, C and C++ are still the best languages for doing that. For example, if you are building a a main memory-based data management system, you would build it in a language like C.
Right.
But then other languages, there might be other ways much more appropriate to build those, and so forth. So you have to make a choice around the functional aspects of the software that you are building, the user community that will build this, the programmer communities. For example, you have to look at in the countries or regions where you want to build the software, what are the prevalent languages and so forth. So you make a choice. The language itself is simply a means to an end. So you have to make a choice based on the characteristics that you want to serve.
Right.
And that is my main point.
Yeah, and just keeping them flexible enough for upcoming changes.
For changes that come,
right.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So are there any potential areas within SAP where you currently see gaps, whether it be potentially even from a technology perspective, where a budding startup could potentially be acquired and plugged in?
Oh, we have, we publish our roadmaps long in advance because we have a fairly massive ecosystem.
Sure.
So, and as to gaps, yes, we have lots of gaps. Depending on how long a time frame you look at, there are functional areas across the spectrum of business. There are a lot of interesting business activities that are emerging, talent management, for example, in HR, things like that, where there are a lot of startups that we see. And we do a lot of partnerships around, around those white spaces and things like that. And we acquire, acquisitions are based not on any particular motive, but on a particular business situation that happens to show up. For example, in the case of business objects or in the case of Versa and so forth. So it's difficult for me to say in advance what kind of a company we will buy a year from now. But really, we publish our roadmap. We have a very trustful relationship with our partners where we rely on what they do, they rely on what we do, and so forth. And so we have a thriving ecosystem across the board, all the way from certifications to reselling partnerships to finally to OEMs and even acquisitions. And I would encourage companies to look at what we do, look at our roadmaps, look at where we have published, what our plans are, and so forth, and think about what they do, accordingly. And we encourage startups to be in our ecosystem.
No, that's great. That's I think that mentality is definitely needed in just the entrepreneurial society of today.
Yeah.
And can you share with us a little bit about your experiences with TiE and how TiE can be a potential platform for budding as well as experienced entrepreneurs?
I think TiE, my earliest memory of TiE is coming here to, in fact, to this very convention center in 1996 or 97 with my brother Vijay when we were starting a company. And TiE has been, so our investors in our first startup were all members of TiE.
Sure.
They're all, in fact, I saw many of them here earlier today. So TiE is a very strong network for entrepreneurs of the Indian subcontinent, but in general for entrepreneurs. And I think it is a very powerful thing. So at SAP, we are a strong believer in TiE. We are a strong supporter. We are a gold sponsor.
That's great.
I just say thank you to TiE. It is an awesome organization. It is a great resource for entrepreneurs of all kinds. And there isn't much that I can give TiE by the way of advice. I wish that there was just more of this kind of networking and
right. No, certainly. So in closing, I want to ask you, what are some of the things that motivate you, or things that make you tick, make you want to wake up in the morning and just hit the ground running?
Yeah, I mentioned some of that in my talk. I think coming to an understanding of some of the fundamental principles that our systems are built on, that is something that I always find interesting. I'm a big student of trying to understand things that are invariant, things that don't change. Look underneath the surface of hype and the surface of trends. And I think that is very important for entrepreneurs to keep in mind, especially here in the Valley. We always get caught in a wave, and which is great because Silicon Valley is all about innovation and we need to create a lot of these trends and a lot of these waves. But it is also important when you are building systems to understand what is underneath that. What are the fundamental principles that some of these technologies, some of these innovations are based on? What changes, what doesn't change, and things of that sort. So I always advise entrepreneurs to always look behind the surface, look beneath the surface of what they are doing to understand the governing dynamics. And personally, that makes me also, that excites me to understand, where things are going.
Well, thank you very much, Vishal, for joining us. It's definitely been a pleasure.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure for me too.
Great, thank you. This has been Utkarsh Ahuja with Vishal Sikka, CTO of SAP. Thank you very much. You can check out the interview on TiEcon.org. you.